Hey guys, my name is Elijah and welcome to Film Artsy, your number one source for all things films and movies. And for a couple of weeks now, we've been really following the Spider-Man story or the Spider-Man deal that's been going back and forth between Marvel and the Disney side of things with Sony, who owns the distribution and production rights to film adaptations of Spider-Man. Now, if you guys haven't followed the story, as a lot of you guys probably know, or at least you had to have heard of at some point, Spider-Man's been dropped from the MCU as the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Disney were not able to come up with a deal with Sony, allowing Disney and the MCU to continue to use the Spider-Man character in upcoming movies, which means as of now, even though there was a ton of debate and conversations going on between Disney and Sony, there looks like there was no resolution, and it was pretty much said that Spider-Man would be continuing on his own universe, likely to merge in with the Venom universe, and Sony would just do what they wanted with the character from there, and Disney would just have to continue on without this character that was so integral to a lot of storylines in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And despite renegotiations, it looked like everything was said and done and no deal was made. We reported on all of this and it seemed like everything was set in stone. However, we got this covered actually just recently, leaked out some information from a well-known source, apparently the same source that reported that they were making a She-Hulk and Miss Marvel show early on, well before the studio officially announced it. So this person does have somewhat of a track record of leaking reputable information. However, it looks like from this recent leak that the studios are still somewhat talking, trying to see if there could be some sort of a deal made. This time suggesting that Disney might be approaching Sony from a completely different side of things, not trying to make a deal for the rights to use Spider-Man in the MCU, but this time just buying Spider-Man outright so that they never have to worry about losing this character again, and having Spider-Man reintegrated into Disney and Marvel's lineup, being able to use him wherever and for whatever. Now, these deals are still probably in the early phases, and there's probably not going to be anything reported on unless this deal actually somehow is completely closed and Disney somehow pulls off buying Spider-Man back from Sony. But it's reported that Sony has an evaluation of Spider-Man at somewhere around $10 billion. The rights that they have to Spider-Man, that's what they feel like this character is worth. And from these reports, it's looking like Disney is not willing to dish out $10 billion, as that's a ton of money for Spider-Man. And they're kind of in, apparently, this talk where it's seeing how much Sony would be willing to come down on the price if they can't reach a deal that would allow for Disney to have the rights back to Spider-Man for future Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Sony knows that they obviously have Disney kind of cornered, and they can really just do whatever they want until they have a deal that they're really happy with. But I don't know how willing Sony is really actually about giving up Spider-Man altogether. We're starting to wonder if maybe they're saying this $10 billion evaluation as a negotiation tactic to have Disney just come down a little bit on their initial deal and realize that what Sony was asking for to continue to give the rights to them for Spider-Man maybe wasn't as financially crazy as a $10 billion acquisition to get Spider-Man back. We don't have all the details as to what's going on in the negotiation room and the extent of it, but it is getting interesting that even weeks after it looked like everything was dead, there's still some sort of communication going on between Disney and Sony, and Disney honestly doesn't like to lose. So it's really interesting how these two massive corporations are really getting down to figuring out Spider-Man in the future, but we're still optimistic that there's a chance that we're going to see Spider-Man and Tom Holland in the Marvel Cinematic Universe maybe one day in the future. Now, one thing that we don't really have a whole lot of information on regarding this new negotiation is if the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Disney was able to acquire the rights back to Spider-Man, that would actually put Sony at a pretty big loss for a major series that they're running, as I believe that would likely include all of the villains and characters associated with it, which means Sony would not be able to continue to work on the Venom series of movies and the whole universe that they're building. Likely those movies would still see releases, as we've seen Disney do that after acquiring other franchises, like when they originally acquired the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Marvel, they still finished out the movies that were in production before taking the production under their own helm for future movies. So it'd be likely we would still see any movies that are in progress right now being released still. However, it'd be really weird to see Sony giving that up, but $10 billion is a lot of money. If you look at Spider-Man Far From Home, that movie was the most successful Spider-Man movie, and it made $1 billion. So essentially, Sony evaluates their IP and their franchises at 10 times the worth of Spider-Man. So for Marvel and Disney to come in and purchase Spider-Man back, they're going to have to make a ton of money off of this character. And even though it's likely Tom Holland's down for whatever work he has with this character, as he does play a great character, it's really boosted his career a lot, chances are that even if he's willing to return for 4, 5, even 6 more movies, that still wouldn't necessarily cover the costs of purchasing this property completely back from Sony. So it puts them in a really interesting place where this negotiation could either be outright, where Sony's actually maybe willing to sell their character off and would meet on some sort of price. $10 billion obviously is a lot of money, but maybe they would take a little bit less. Or it could just be a negotiation tactic by Sony to try to get Disney to reconsider just signing some sort of deal that would allow Spider-Man to exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe like they used to have when they did the first Spider-Man Homecoming movie and his appearance in Civil War and Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. So this is kind of where we're at with this whole Spider-Man situation. It seems like we're getting updates somewhat frequently, at least every couple of weeks, and we're going to continue to report on this as more information comes out, because this is one of the biggest moving factors in the future of the MCU as to whether or not there's going to be Spider-Man movies coming out. And if we're going to see Spider-Man movies that are in the MCU and not produced by Sony, they're going to have to start production on this relatively soon, as time's starting to get short and they don't want to make people wait 4 or 5 years to get a third Spider-Man movie. It's likely still going to be on track for a movie in the next 2 years, and they got to kind of come up with a plan on what's going to happen with this and how it's going to happen. When they finally decided to land a deal for Civil War, it wasn't very long at all before they had Spider-Man fully on the big screen. It happened within a year, and sometimes these deals just move quickly like that. So we're going to have to see where all of this lands and what happens moving forward, but we'd like to turn this around to you guys. We know we all want to see Spider-Man in the MCU just because that's how it's been so far, but specifically, if you were Sony and you were in this position where you had this character, would you sell the character to Disney and lose a powerful asset like Spider-Man, but take the money? Or would you try to negotiate a deal? Let us know what you think in the comments down below, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on for more videos just like this. We'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video. Bye guys.
Talking?
I'm about to.
Hi everybody.
Hey everybody, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi. See you guys.
Know anybody?